back to CyberTangent. Today we are honored to have Graham Cluley as our guest. We are affectionately calling this a look back at cybersecurity with Graham Cluley, but we could equally call it a look back at Graham Cluley with the cybersecurity industry. So welcome, Graham. We're eager for this conversation.
Hi, and thank you very much for inviting me onto the CyberTangent. It's good to be here.
Graham Cluley started working in the computer security industry in the 90s and was subsequently employed in senior roles by Sophos, where he founded the Naked Security blog, and McAfee. Today, as most of our listeners will know, Graham works for himself as an independent blogger and podcaster at Smashing Security. The smashing, no doubt, referring to his good looks. He also speaks at various events and makes international media appearances. In his free time, Graham enjoys a good game of chess, including on Thursdays, which is tonight. So again, Graham, this is going to be fun. I look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well.
So we are eager to both pick around the edges of some important cybersecurity topics and get to know the man behind the plan here, Graham Cluley. So if we can start off, if you can help tell the story about how you got into the cybersecurity space so long ago.
Yeah, make me feel really ancient. Well, I was a poor, impoverished student in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And one of the ways in which I earned a crust was I wrote some computer games. And the computer games said that if you enjoyed the game, send me £5 or £10 through the post, and then I can collect all that money together and I can go to the supermarket and buy some cheesy biscuits. That amazingly worked. People would go to the effort of putting some money in the post or sending me a little check. This is the days before online purchases. And because they liked my games, which was fantastic. And one day I popped home and there was a parcel waiting for me on my doorstep, and I opened it up and there's lots of polystyrene, and I dug in and I found a copy of Dr. Solomon's antivirus toolkit, which was the leading British antivirus software at the time in about 1990. And there was a check for £10, which was very nice, and a packet of cheesy biscuits. So I didn't even have to go down to the supermarket. Oh, and there was a letter from Alan Solomon, who really did exist. Dr. Solomon was a real thing. And he said, "Love your games. Do you fancy a job?" And I thought, yes, please, because I was desperate for a programming job. And so I ended up writing the very first Windows version of Dr. Solomon's antivirus toolkit. And I've been stuck in the computer security industry ever since, all those days ago.
And so fast forwarding through these years, there's very few people at this point in time that have the breadth of view that you have into the industry. You speak to dozens of cyber leaders every week. You play an important role in shaping the thinking of the industry. Here's my question for you, Graham. If you looked back over the years, do you see a few key themes that have emerged from cyber?
I think one of the interesting things which has become apparent over the years is that this isn't a technological problem. The technology has moved on a pace, and there's plenty of things which have technologically come about which have helped improve the situation and made things better. But fundamentally, computer security is a human problem. And you can have all the patches in the world for Windows or Mac OS or Linux, and you can roll them out at incredibly fast speeds. But you can't patch the bug in people's brain, the thing which makes them click on links without thinking, the thing which makes them download dangerous apps, the thing which makes them agree to terms and conditions which they've never read, and they have no understanding as to what is going to happen to their data and how they're going to be abused. So if we could get rid of all the humans, we'd be doing just fine. But that's probably not the solution we want. But that's one thing which has really become apparent. The other thing for me, from my perspective, having worked over 25 years in this industry, is just how big a problem this has become. Way back then, when I started writing antivirus software, there was something like 200 new computer viruses every month. And I remember the journalists saying to us, "What are you going to do when there are 10,000 viruses in total? How are you going to fit all of those definitions to detect them onto a floppy disk?" Because remember, we were sending out updates to people via the post in those days. We weren't using the internet to get people updates. And it was something we really wondered about. Well, today, there are over 400,000 new variants of malware spotted every 24 hours. It's more than 2 every second. So it's become enormously organized. It's an organized criminal activity, whereas it used to be kids. And now, of course, governments are involved and countries are spying upon each other and hacking each other and stealing information and intellectual property. It's just become this really big deal.
That's great. So not a tech problem, a people problem, and it's a big one. I find it a little ironic that it's not a technology problem, but we have a ton of technology applied to it. It is a people problem, and we need a lot more people.
Yeah, well, it'd be wrong to say it's not partly a technological problem. Obviously, there is a technological element, but I think we mustn't overlook the human factor is absolutely essential as well. And we've got some amazing technology, and there's loads of smart companies out there now who are producing solutions which truly are commendable, and the safety net which they provide to organizations in order to better defend themselves and individuals as well is fantastic. And I would say to anybody going on the internet, you need security software. You need solutions which are going to help protect you as you're surfing the web, as you're installing programs, and to properly defend your data. You need layered defenses in place, but you also need a good, healthy dollop of common sense as well, which sadly isn't that common.
With respect to the scope of the problem, what's your sense of where we are? Is the wave just forming, or is it about to crest, or what do you think?
Well, I think it's really difficult to make predictions in this industry because things can change so quickly. New vulnerabilities, new exploits, new problems can be uncovered, and to such a surprising degree. We would never have imagined just a few years ago that we would have seen countries hacking each other and stealing information. It really was just teenagers before that who were doing it. So that was the sort of work of science fiction, really, what we were seeing there. Now we see things like the Internet of Things coming around the corner, which poses a tremendous threat because so many IoT devices aren't properly secured and aren't properly hardened and don't have an updating infrastructure. So if you ask me what way are we going, I'm rather worried that we ain't seen nothing yet. I think things are just going to get worse. I think more and more criminals are going to see the benefits of hacking and compared to sort of real life crime and how much money they can make and how they can monetize that data. And many businesses, sadly, I mean, just look at the headlines, are being hacked every day and more information is being stolen. If anything, a problem we're facing right now is sort of cyber fatigue, where people are just like fairly nonchalant. Oh, so my identity's got stolen again, or the government's been hacked again, and they've got my social security numbers, or they've got my fingerprint data, and it's like we almost shrug at this stuff. We forget about it because there's another hack just around the corner.
Saw an interesting poll the other day where they reported 86% of the people that were asked considered that their social security number was a public piece of information.
Right.
To that point.
I think we need to sort of rethink maybe how information like social security numbers are used. I mean, clearly, they shouldn't be used as something which uniquely identifies you any longer. Just the presence of a social security number. Maybe we need other methods to properly identify ourselves because that is something which has been compromised. But so many things are reliant upon that sort of data.
I know for my part, in order to stay abreast of industry trends, I listen to Smashing Security and I read your blog at grahamcluley.com. What do you read to stay up to date on the industry?
I think the primary source which I use these days is Twitter. There are so many smart people and smart companies who are posting up information about the research which they've done on Twitter. And if you cultivate yourself a little list of security people or security news outlets, you can get fantastic information. I mean, aside from Twitter, there are the obvious candidates. It would be remiss not to talk about people like Troy Hunt and Brian Krebs, both of whom run super blogs. Troy also runs the Have I Been Pwned service, which is something everyone should sign up for. And if you get a call from one of those guys and you're running a company, you want to wake up and listen, because if Troy or Brian Krebs get in contact, chances are you've got a serious problem on your hands, which you're going to need to communicate to your customers, and they may know about it before you do.
I'm interested in your take on this, in particular on the younger generation that is entering into the cybersecurity industries. We know cyber's high-tech, fast-moving, high adventure, and this naturally attracts the younger tech-loving generation, right? What are your observations, first of all, on the younger generation now entering cyber? And then if you wouldn't just keep talking and share some advice that you would have for some of the newer entrants.
So I obviously think it's fantastic. I want more and more people interested in computer security. And if they can contribute to the community by building solutions or being educators or helping businesses protect themselves, that's fantastic. Let's not just make this something which nerds are interested in. We need everybody to be interested in this, and everyone has a part to play about this. What I would advise people, though, is to tread carefully, because I think, so when you're a young person and you've got computer skills, you might be tempted to investigate whether companies have vulnerabilities, for instance. Maybe you want to see if you can hack into a particular organization. And there you really need to tread carefully, because there's a chance that they may view your hacking of them as malicious, where they may contact the authorities and you may blot your copybook. Ideally, if you're going to be testing someone's defenses, you need to do it with their permission. So be very careful about that. Obviously, I would also say from an antivirus background, don't write malware, don't write worms, don't write Trojan horses, because again, that's something which people are going to look badly upon, and the security industry may be nervous about taking you on. They want people who are not just capable and not just understanding security, but have also demonstrated that they have a mature approach and that they can be trusted. Be very careful about what you do, and don't paint yourself to be one of the bad guys, because it may cause you problems later on.
And linger out there in the internet too.
Yeah, embrace the internet, make friends and relationships digitally via the internet, via Twitter. There was a guy who was writing for my site who he was contributing fantastic content and doing terrific research. And after a while, I found out that he was a 15-year-old schoolboy. But it was invisible to me, what his age was and what his background was. All I knew was this was a guy who really was interested in computer security, and I gave him a platform to write some articles on my site. And I think that's the kind of thing you want to do. If you're enthusiastic about this, do this. But also, don't spend too much time in your bedroom. Try and keep a genuine meet zone relationship as well. Meet real people, go out, have some fun, keep things in balance. I think that's important for all of us, because I'm as guilty as the next man of having a rather sedentary work style.
You don't mean real people,
sometimes you need to get up.
You don't mean real people, do you?
Well, it's difficult for us nerds sometimes, isn't it? If you're a programming type, I know personally, I'm quite introverted and all the rest of it, and it's not always easy to chat to people who you don't know and make relationships. But I think stretch yourself that way as well, because that will be an important part of your job. You're not always going to be at a computer. You're going to be in a business. You're going to be speaking to customers. You're going to be speaking to your partners. You're going to be speaking to your colleagues in the office. So don't just tie yourself to the computer.
Great segue. As you know, the name of our podcast is CyberTangent, so we do like to go on the occasional tangent. We're going to stretch you for a few minutes here, Graham, in an effort to get to know you better, if that's okay with you, with your permission.
You're not socially engineering me, are you, to break into my account and not get my secret questions to account?
Your spidey sense is healthy here. We will start off with some rapid fire questions just to warm you up a little bit, okay?
All right, okay.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs. He's a miniature Labradoodle. He's a lovely dog, but I can't tell you his name because then you'll know my Yahoo password.
Cake or pie?
I'm more of a pie man.
Opening chess move, King's Gambit or Queen's Gambit?
Oh, Queen's Gambit. Absolutely Queen's Gambit. That's what I'm going to be playing tonight. I've got a match on.
Premier soccer teams, Arsenal or Manchester United?
Look, I'm a computer programmer. I know nothing about football at all.
Fair enough.
But my wife's grandfather played for Chelsea. So I guess, can I say Chelsea?
You just added a third. Chelsea it is. Most used app on your phone? Well,
it would probably be Twitter, I guess.
I guessed that. Last thing you Googled?
Well, I don't use Google. Sorry, it's been pedantic. Slightly nerdy answer. Because I don't like the idea of Google scooping up all of my information. So I'm going to have to say nothing.
Okay, perfect. We're learning about you. End of the rapid fire questions, but still in a spirit of getting to know you. Are you familiar with the concept of love language?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll repeat them for you. And then I'm going to ask you which one is your love language. Love language is the concept was developed in a book 10 years ago. And it's the thing, we'll just pick on your wife, the thing that your wife does that most fills you up, let's say. Okay. Here's the 5 love languages: quality time, words of affirmation, physical touch, gifts, and acts of service. Which of those is your love language, Graham?
It's really interesting you ask this, because my wife and I have discussed this a lot over the years. There is no doubt whatsoever what mine is, and it is words of affirmation. That's my soul is like a colander. I need constant love being poured into it, but unfortunately it all drains away through the bottom, so it needs constant refilling and affirmation. And I tend to give love that way as well, so I tend to be very wordy in my love, which of course is great if your partner appreciates that particular kind of affection. But if she wanted physical love or one of those others instead, she might say, could you just stop talking? Could you stop?
Just give me
Stop
a gift.
being nice to me with your words.
Give me a gift already, please.
Exactly. Or put out the bins if you want to show me real love.
That is where it gets complex. So, and you lead a fairly introverted, yes, but you lead a fairly public life. Does the words of affirmation put you in a pickle at times, as you will take both affirmation and probably, let's call it non-affirmation in various arenas?
Well, I have a strangely psychotic sort of life, because half of the time I am in my little home office recording podcasts or writing for my blog, and it is fairly solitary, apart from the odd Skype call and things like that. But the rest of my time I go out and give talks. And that's where I sort of get to press flesh, as it were. Ooh, that sounds rather grim, doesn't it? That's where I get to tap dance. And there's nothing quite like the adrenaline rush of going on a stage and thinking, oh, that talk went really well. And I love it when people come up afterwards and say, that was a really good talk. And I genuinely find that very touching. So I do get to feed myself in both directions. But it works for me. I've been working for myself now for, I think, 4 or coming up to 5 years maybe. And I've really enjoyed it. I enjoy being my own boss, so I'm the only one I can blame for making silly decisions. There's tough times and it's hard work sometimes, but it's a lot of fun as well.
Last tangent style question. You've already confessed that you were a naughty teenager.
Not that naughty.
Well, they're your words, not mine, but anyway.
I kidnapped the school Christmas tree. It was things like that.
Okay. Well, so if your wife was called by the police and reported that you'd been arrested, but without any explanation why, what would your wife guess you had done?
Oh my goodness. She, by the way, is much more likely to be arrested than me. But I imagine I'd probably be done for insolence. That was normally my problem at school, was just being a bit of a smart aleck. Oh, in England you can, yes. And stepping on the cracks in the pavement, or walking down the high street in a loud shirt. All sorts of things like that are illegal in our country, which I know you live in the land of the free, so you get away with it. I can't think of anything else. I'll tell you what I'd love to be arrested for. I'll tell you what I'd love to do. I would love, in a parallel universe, I wouldn't be a computer security dude. I would be an international art thief. I'd be going around on my motorboat stealing treasures from very rich people who could afford it, I think. And I'd have one of those little pulleys coming down from the ceiling, like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, stealing the Koh-i-Noor diamond. That's what I would love. So if I was going to commit any crime which ended up with me getting the clink, although I would have to then escape from the prison as well, it would be something like that. International art thievery, not national art thievery. That's not good enough. It has to be international art thief.
You've clearly thought through this. International, by boat, art.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So if any listeners out there have a speedboat, a cigarette boat, if you will, that are willing to lend it to Graham.
Preferably in Monte Carlo.
Okay. Well, if it's by boat, then it's kind of by definition in some nice areas, which is well thought out. I like that. Okay, let's get back to work. I don't know if you've noticed this. I have. Many of the, let's call them over 40 years old cyber professionals have taken to calling themselves curmudgeons for some reason. It seems like a term that's being thrown out around there. Regardless of whether our industry attracts people that call themselves actually curmudgeons, there's no doubt that there is a pervasive cynicism and maybe even skepticism for the hardened professionals in our industry that you deal with every day. How do you handle the challenge of interviewing the curmudgeonly, secretive, tight-lipped cyber professionals when you're engaging with them for at times 30 minutes or 60 minutes or longer?
Oh, maybe buy them a drink. I don't know. I think you join them in their curmudgeonness. I mean, I'm afraid it is something I lean towards as well. I mean, in particular, with the rise of things like the Internet of Things, I'm just constantly thinking, well, why do you actually need that? And I can imagine myself becoming my own grandfather, just sort of berating everything, hating progress. I think the problem is that we work in this industry where we are facing every single day bad news and horrible things happening. And quite often, the horrible things which happen are things which could have been avoided, or the same mistakes being made over and over again. People reusing passwords, people putting data on improperly secured servers which don't have any kind of two-factor authentication on them or something like that, or vulnerabilities which haven't been patched. The same thing over and over again. And inevitably, it does make us rather cynical. And it also makes us rather skeptical as well, because whenever someone says, oh, it's the end of the world as we know it, this latest breach, this changes everything. It's just like, oh, come on, we've heard this so many times before that we begin to be doubtful about it. It is something I fight myself, because I do think we mustn't be too closed off to progress and some of the fantastic things which technology can bring. But inevitably, when someone talks to me about an internet-enabled toothbrush, my mind instantly goes into how that could all go wrong. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're all humans. Although some of us sit in our ivory towers, we're all the same. We all go to the loo. We all have a shower in the morning. We all have to shave. And it's just about connecting on a human level and just showing yourself to be someone who you can have a conversation with and not be too bogged down in buzzwords. That's one of the things which I really dislike about this industry, is how many people will just reel out the buzzwords and the terminology, which I think do inevitably ostracize people who are outside the community or people who are joining it because they feel left out. And I think there needs to be more plain language spoken about computer security if we're ever really going to get everyone interested in it and get everyone fighting the good fight, because this is a fight which is worth fighting for. This is the internet, for all of our moaning and grumbling, is a fantastic thing which enables millions of people around the world to communicate, people who would have lost touch otherwise, businesses to be formed which could never have existed without the internet as well, and even podcasts. What a fantastic invention they are. So I love the internet. I love computers. I guess I just really want to keep them lovely as much as possible. Maybe that's where the curmudgeonness comes from.
You mentioned progress. Is cybersecurity better off or worse off today than it was 10 years ago? Probably an unfair
I think
question.
we're better off. I actually think we're better off. Even though there are more threats, even though there are more criminals, even though there are more hacks, I think real progress has been made. The technology has got better. The solutions have got superior. And education, I mean, we were talking about fixing the bug in people's brain. Education and awareness has increased. Isn't it amazing that you can speak to almost anybody in the high street today and they know what identity theft is? Which sounds like a science fiction term. It sounds like something from a sci-fi book where people are stealing your shadow or something like that. But today, most people know what it is, and they actually are pretty upset about it. They don't view it as some sort of bizarre thing they can't relate to. They're like, no, I don't like that idea. I don't like the idea of companies losing my data and then criminals being able to abuse that information. They feel quite strongly about it. So I think generally we're in a better place. I think some of the major operating systems have improved immensely in terms of security, which is something which we should all welcome. Like I said, I think awareness is increasing. Doesn't mean there's not still some way to go.
Okay, so let's look forward. How is cybersecurity going to be different 10 years from now?
Oh, I can't. Come on, man. I'm not going to get my crystal ball out. It's just impossible. It's impossible to imagine. Anybody who says, oh, this is what it's going to be, you haven't got a clue what's coming around the corner. Only 10 years ago, we saw the first proper smartphone. The iPhone came out 10 years ago, right? Late 2007. And it changed the world. It changed the way we exist as human beings. It changed the way we communicate. Some ways it's been fantastic. Other ways it's been terrible, because we're now all as addicted to smartphones as people used to be to cigarettes. And they get twitchy if they haven't got them in their hand. Who knows what's going to come around the corner in terms of computer security? I think the only thing we can be certain of is that the criminals are going to carry on exploiting the internet and computers and IoT to steal data, to make money, because there will still be flaws and there will be weaknesses and there will be humans who they can take advantage of. But 10 years, boy, oh boy, I would never have imagined we would have got to this place that we're in right now when I started in this industry. It would just been complete fantasy, and I think it's impossible to predict what's coming around the corner.
The Chief Information Security Officer sits at the center of a lot of what we've talked about and bears the brunt and is forced to think through these things in an operational way. What are some of the major challenges you see surrounding that CISO role within major organizations, and what encouragement would you have for that professional?
So I think a lot of CISOs are really quite clued up and, have got their finger on the button. They understand the challenges. They understand the challenges with their staff. One of the biggest challenges they face, of course, is with management and the board of the company, and making sure that they have bought into the importance of security and ensuring that there's no data breach as well. And many security teams inside organizations do not have the proper resources in terms of personnel or in terms of money to do the job properly. And I think security continues to be something which is seen as an expense rather than an investment for the future. I think a really essential part of being a CISO is learning how to communicate, how to manipulate, how to convince the board that they need to believe in security. And that then can be something which trickles down throughout the entire company. But I think it's hard being in charge of security, because if you're doing your job well, nothing happens, right? Everything just keeps ticking along. People only really notice when something goes badly wrong. And then, of course, it's your neck on the line. So it's in some ways a bit of a thankless job. And we need to change that perception. And we need to applaud and congratulate people, when nothing has happened. And maybe that's because of the good work which they've done at an organization.
So let's even make it more personal. A dear friend of yours has recently taken a new CISO role and is about to, for the first time, present to their board. What 3 words of advice would you have for your dear friend as they prepare for their first board presentation?
3 words?
3 pieces of advice. 3, 2, 5, whichever. I'm not going to limit you, right?
Okay.
What words of advice?
Okay, 3 words. Keep it simple, right? Because these are people on the board who are concerned about all manner of issues with the company, all sorts of things which you're completely blind to and you have no insight on. So you need to keep it simple. You need to keep it relevant to them. And don't get bogged down with buzzwords. And give them real life examples which they can relate to. Maybe tell them some stories about other companies, maybe in your industry, maybe in related businesses, who've suffered breaches, who've suffered a hack, who've had a security faux pas, and what can happen and what can be the business implications for the company. So they can understand that this isn't just a theoretical threat. This is a threat which potentially could destroy the company or destroy its reputation or destroy the brand, could cost millions and millions if steps aren't taken to properly protect against it. And make it engaging. Like I said, don't use the buzzwords. Really put some effort into making sure that you've captured the mind share of that board so that they're going to listen to you. And whenever they are concerned about security, they will come to you and seek your expertise.
Graham, this has been so much fun. What did we learn? We've learned that your love language is words of affirmation.
Yeah, I'm really uncomfortable sharing that. I'm English,
We learned that you're a naughty teenager, and everyone learned, including your opponent tonight, that you're going to use the Queen's Gambit opening. So thank you for your transparency and vulnerability today. Can you share, in wrapping up here, Graham, can you share what are some of the exciting projects you have coming up for Smashing Security that we can look forward to?
Well, Smashing Security is the podcast which I do with my colleague Carol Theriault. It comes out every Thursday on all good podcast platforms, wherever you can find CyberTangent. I imagine you can also find us. It's really good fun. Big projects, we just sort of make it up as we go along, really. We reflect whatever is happening in the world of computer security, and we try and keep it light and engaging. We don't just want to speak to a security audience. We want anyone who has a computer or anyone who has a smartphone to be interested in how to properly protect themselves. And aside from smashing security, I also run my own blog at grahamclulley.com, where I'm regularly writing about computer security issues and advice and tips and trying to avoid those old buzzwords, So I'm going to keep on chugging along for a while, and I'll certainly be tuning into future episodes of CyberTangent as well. It's great to see so many firms now jumping on board the podcast bandwagon, because I think it's a great medium for communicating some of these important issues.
Thanks for joining us today, Graham. It was fun.
Cheers. Good fun.
Have a good day.